All right, so today I want to talk about languages, just in general, because in case you didn't know, languages are everything to humans. I mean, it is the one thing that I can confidently say, um, you know, people, human beings, specifically Homo sapiens, are the best at language. There's nothing even really that comparable. We have no idea how much language, ancestor species of humans, we have no idea what their language capacity was. But we know a good amount about us, and we know how important language is to us because there have been there's been some specific cases of neglected babies or toddlers that, not only weren't loved and cared for really well, but weren't really taught how to communicate. And there's been a couple cases of this that have been documented. And when it happens, it's obviously very detrimental. I mean, the baby could die. What specifically causes the kid to die? I mean, obviously you're feeding it and such, but does lack of affection lead directly to death? I mean, it would be hard to prove something like that, but we can reason that, we need certain stimulation, otherwise our brain, stops functioning normally. Look at people in solitary isolation for extended periods of time. I mean, absolutely destroys a person. They may never recover mentally from being isolated like that. We need certain stimulations or our brains stop functioning well. There's a saying in English, use it or lose it, and it works so well for so many things. I think most people are aware of muscles. If you stop working out, your muscles shrink because they're expensive for your body to maintain. You have to, maintain the cellular structure, and, when you use them, they burn energy and they produce a lot of, byproducts from cellular respiration that your body needs to get rid of. It is energetically expensive to maintain certain things in your body. So if you stop using that thing, your body's going to stop maintaining it and, in fact, get rid of it through various means. Cell death is very normal. Very normal. I mean, it's said roughly that every 7 years or so, your body completely replaces itself. Obviously, there are exceptions with neurons, because certain neurons do not, ever reproduce again. There's going to be exceptions to everything, of course. But basically, cell death is very normal, and without it, we wouldn't be here. It's so easy for us to be oh, this is so fascinating that this is like this. But if it wasn't like that, we would never have been here in the first place. You understand? Free radicals, chemical reactions that occur in our body, certain ones are thought to contribute to aging. And our body has ways of trying to control free radical reactions. By the way, free radical reactions are what happens when you have a bonfire. The fire you see is just the release of energy from free radical reactions, which are almost out of control, as you can tell. The body burns glucose and certain other biofuels. We say burn in English because it's literally the same chemical reaction as a fire. It's the rate of energy release that differs. So the body has to be able to control free radical reactions somewhat. They are pretty much inherently uncontrollable by definition. But it's so amazing that we can do this, but if we could never have done it, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Something had to evolve that ability to lead to us in the evolutionary chain. You understand? And yeah, we can say it's amazing, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't like that in the first place. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't even remember what I was rambling about. But this video is about language, and language is what humans have evolved, and they're the best. We are the best at language of everything we know of. Certainly whales, I've talked about whales, other things communicate, and have complex communication that we have no idea how to decipher. There are certain languages that we could never decipher. You usually need like some kind of key, like a Rosetta Stone or something to lead to actual translation, depending on how complicated something is. But like whale clicks and complicated sounds they make, I mean, how could we ever translate that? But either way, confidently, I can say that Homo sapiens are the best at language that has ever lived. And I think there's estimated like around 7,000 languages currently spoken today in existence. The numbers, you guys, I don't ever stress about like the specific number of languages because, of course, as all things, it gets complicated. Like there's usually continuums between certain languages where they overlap. It's called mutual intelligibility, like how well can certain languages understand each other. Obviously, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, British people, Jamaicans a lot. Any country where the primary language is English, usually we can understand each other pretty well. Because English is interesting in that way that like you can really butcher your pronunciation of English words, but as long as you say the words somewhat accurately, most people will get the idea of what you're talking about. Whereas other languages, that is not the case at all. I mean, I am not a linguist. I'm so bad with languages. Maybe I'm not that bad, but I'm certainly not good with language. But I really like French. And I've spent some time around French people. I spent, 40 plus days in France, and I cannot speak French. But I realized quickly that, unless you nail the pronunciation in French a lot of the times, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. It is not a language that you can butcher and get away with. And there's a big cultural difference between French people and at least Americans. I'm only speaking for Americans, obviously, because I'm American. But they'll correct your grammar. And it's seen as rude because in America that doesn't fly because our history is cursed and there's been a lot of racism with grammar correction and stuff. The British people, as far as I can understand, like from the videos I've seen and the research I've done, they're definitely more, particular. Like they want you to speak English well or whatever. And for a long time, like British people would not use words that Americans use all the time, but that's changing now because Americans in general seem to shorten things if they can or speak more efficiently, say less words to get their point across. And so it's like America's like, capitalist. It's all about efficiency and stuff. So it's not surprising that that extends to language. But, I feel like for the most part, Americans could care less about the proper maintenance of English. Like, we make up words all the time, and some words are awesome and fun to make up. That's why English is cool, but French, you cannot do that, and it kind of bums me out that, like, when you're learning French for the first time, like, I was never taught that. Like, you have to learn that about French people, or if you go to France, you might be taken seriously aback and, like, be embarrassed to talk because you're afraid that French people are going to correct how you say things, and they will, but they don't. I don't think a lot of French people mean it in an arrogant way. It just comes off as arrogance to Americans. Again, it's a difference in culture. Another thing about French is I think it's generally understood, that kids are way better at learning languages than adults, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The big reason being something called neuroplasticity. Basically, like young brains are like sponges, and they're not developed all the way, obviously, and even certain parts of the brain haven't been specifically chosen to function a certain way. So like you'll see a lot of cases of little kids like losing big parts of their brain for various reasons and being absolutely okay. But if I lose a big part of my brain, considering that my brain's fully developed as far as I know, it would be absolutely devastating because I do not possess neuroplasticity. I no longer have the stem cells that can replace damage to the brain. But kids have that, and something, with language and kids, we don't understand our brains very well, so I'm not gonna act like I even have a clue, but, something with the development of kids' brains, they soak in that language and they can learn languages fast. In French, there's a lot of words with like and you have to be able to use your throat, roll your R's. Some people cannot do that, adults. So they could never learn, they could learn French, but they could never speak French. I promise you, French people will not understand anything you're talking about if you can't, French people don't even understand each other very well, depending on where you are. The famous example is Marseille in the south. Really different dialect that people in the north might not even be able to understand. You understand? So where's the hope for somebody, I'm 27, I've studied a little French, I'm kind of dipping my toes back in. What are the chances that I could ever even speak close to a native in French? I mean, basically none. But, that doesn't really discourage me because I love the language. It's so fun to say. And I feel like, having a little experience with French people and being older now, I wouldn't be offended if they were correcting my grammar. If they're authentically trying to help me, the context is important, of course. And Parisians are just nasty in general, kind of like a stereotypical New Yorker is. But the French people in general, I just had great experiences with them. And I would not say they're particularly rude. It's part of their culture to really, they really love their language. And I don't think there's a problem with that. Again, I like English, but I like English because I see the practicality in it, and so many people around the world speak it, and I love all the different dialects of non-native English speakers speaking English. I'm not mocking them. I just love I'll give you an example. I love the sound of how Nigerians speak English. Just all my experiences with Nigerian people, they have such deep voices, and my TA this past semester was Nigerian. I just love the way he always said, "Please take notes," and the way he said it was so deep. I love it, and I'm not mocking him. I really appreciate it. I really like the variety of how people say certain words in English. French people, for example, do not pronounce a lot of H's in their words, so you'll hear them say "have" instead of "have." That's just one example. There's so much variety, even in people that are non-native English speakers. So native English speakers, of course, have crazy, different dialects. But for the most part, if you're a native English speaker, you can pretty much understand almost any other English speaker. Scotland, personally, for me, Scotland, Scottish people. I haven't been to Scotland. I've been to London, but one time I was in Paris and I was talking to a Scottish guy, and we were in a pub and there was music and it was a little loud. I had no idea what this Scottish guy was saying to me. I could not understand him at all. And there's a lot of Scottish slang and Scots as a language itself. Some people don't consider it a language. I'm not going to talk about all the minutiae because to me personally, these are just human things. We like to over-categorize things. It's just a human thing. And even the languages, the things that we created, or maybe evolution created, even the things we created don't have strict rules that are followed all the time. There's so many exceptions in English to certain rules. English's rules are just weird to begin with, but even more regular and logical language structure like French, they have so many violations and you can't literally translate things, and language is so cool. But I always think I was born 30 minutes north of the border with Mexico. North of San Diego. I never learned any Spanish. And there's 50 million Spanish speakers in this country, at least. And I think that's as a first language, or maybe not, maybe that's total. But either way, why are we not kids can learn a language in 3 years, 4 years, depending on if they're raised, their entire life in the correct settings. But I see so much value in mixing English and Spanish, here in America. Combined English speakers and Spanish speakers, are in the billions, and why aren't we doing this? And you guys, I'm probably asking stupid questions because America's had so many problems with racial issues and just bad history that I think that's a little in the future. We're not ready for that as a people, and it's sad, but it's realistic, you guys. This country has so many problems still. But just language is just so interesting, and props to everyone that can speak multiple languages. I really wish I could, being an American, if I could learn a language right now instantly, I would have to pick Spanish, because I would use Spanish every single day if I knew it, because I live in Florida. Like, I'm from, California, and I've spent a lot of time in Texas. There are places in Texas where, I didn't hear any English spoken at all, and I loved it. There's nothing wrong with that, because of course Texas was part of Mexico first, and before that was Spanish, and then before that was native. But language is so fascinating, and it's everything to humans, and it's the one thing we can do well. And you guys, we're so lucky with the internet. I don't know what I would do without the internet. Not that I spend all my time on it, but I would say almost everything I know is from the internet, more or less. And I just think it's so cool that we have access, and I can look up French, YouTubers, and just listen to them talk with the subtitles on. And truly, from everything I've learned, that is the ultimate way to learn a language. You gotta listen and watch the media from that country with subtitles on. So watch, French or Spanish shows with English subtitles. If you want to learn a language, you need to do these things, for the most part. Of course, everyone's different, and I'm not good at language to begin with, but for all the people, that are around my age, in their 20s or younger, it is possible. Of course, you really have to work at it, though. The brain is like a muscle, more or less. Use it or lose it. You have to critically think, you have to practice, or you lose it. And it's not like a good or bad thing. It's literally just how it is, Your body can only do so much, but what we can do is amazing. And language is the ultimate, show of that. Language is so complicated, and like I said, there's 7,000 known languages. Of course, the numbers could vary. I saw there was 600 known extinct languages, and then there's so many more unknown extinct languages that we can never learn about, of course. But I think it's thought that languages and humans really took off, some point around 11,000 years ago, when humans first began to domesticate themselves and become agriculture based. That had to have been propelled by an advancement in language, because without language, humans cannot get along at all. Even with language, it's hard for humans to get along. So uniting under a common language culture, was the ultimate step in taking humans from, humans have been around, Homo sapiens, in particular, have been around for at least 200,000 to 300,000 years. For a lot of that time, Homo sapiens were relatively insignificant to the rest of the world, we weren't evolved enough, or we didn't know enough collectively to be able to dominate animals in the world like it is now. And I don't think it's a good thing, the way we treat the world. If anything, I think it's absolutely horrid, but that's a different discussion. But basically, language is the ultimate thing that makes humans humans. And I think it's beautiful, and I love learning about other languages. Linguistics does tend to absolutely overwhelm me, because there's so much information, and it's so fascinating though, and it's such a good topic and something good to learn about, because you can go to other parts of the world, and I've traveled a good amount, but you really don't appreciate a country until you can communicate with the locals, I think, personally. Don't get me wrong, I've spent, like I said, a lot of time in France, and I don't speak French, and I still really enjoyed it. But it would be so much better if I could go back to France, speaking French, hopefully somewhat well, so the French people could understand me. But that's how you truly experience a country. And I do really need to start studying Spanish. I just have not spent a lot of time with Spanish, but I would love to. I just haven't had the time to devote to Spanish. It's just one of those things, you guys, every day, if you just do a little bit of it every day, over time you'll see vast improvements. And if you are a non-native English speaker and are watching this, comment what language you speak. I'd love to know. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.